to be here.
Absolutely.
And I know when we signed off on Friday, we were talking about going fishing. How'd you do?
Well, I actually did not go fishing this weekend.
That's too
They
bad.
had a special charter, so I stayed at the house. My oldest daughter actually graduated from the University of Florida this weekend.
Well, congratulations,
so she's
there,
an official
Dad.
Gator now.
That's right. Go
And which is
Gators.
great because not only that, but we're here at really kind of the heart of Gator country. We're at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. You know, we do our show every Monday and Friday right now live at 9 to 10. Glad you're here. But this is Spurrier's Gridiron Grill at Celebration Point in Gainesville,
I just
Florida.
like the sound of that Gridiron Grill.
Gridiron
Spurrier's
Grill.
Gridiron Grill.
And it is not only a monument to Coach, the old ball coach, as we affectionately call him, but sports in general, especially college sports.
Sure
And,
is.
if you ever get a chance, you should check this area out. Spurrier's Gridiron Grill.
And the food's
in
great.
Gainesville, Florida. Absolutely, man. All right, well, we're going to get right into it here. This is an article that you actually pulled up, Ted.
I did.
I hope is it Epic Times or Epoch Times? How do you say that?
Epic Times.
Epic times. We're living in some epic times, that's for sure. And here's the title of it. It says, German spy agency officially classifies AFD party as extremist. Now, the AFD party is a party, one of the parliamentary system
Right.
they have in Germany. And, my first question, and I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to get it from your perspective, Ted. Why should we as Americans be concerned about what's happening over in Germany in this case?
That's a good question. And, the point for that, or the interest in this, is when you look at the world and you see the WEF, the World Economic Forum, you have this push for globalization. And we see this more in the European countries where they go after political rivals. And what they did in Germany is they made the party, and they did this in France too, they made the party almost illegal. And if you look at how that transcends over here in America, what was going on under the Biden administration, and this really was under the Obama too. When you looked at Obama okaying wiretaps on Trump, a candidate and private citizen, because he was running for presidency, and then under Biden, what they were doing with the parents in Virginia that were challenging the school board on the transgender and the types of books they had in their classrooms, all of a sudden they were going after the Department of Justice was going after these parents as domestic terrorists. And this is a very dangerous path to go on. And we see what's going on in Europe. And what they did is they blocked the candidate, Le Pen, from running, and that she can't run for 5 years. And think of what they did prior to the election with Donald Trump. How many states tried to keep him off the ballot? Is this any different than what they're doing over there? And this is the sign of things to come if you get the wrong people in charge. And that's why it was so great that Harris and her team did not win and Trump won hands down.
Well, you mentioned the Obama administration and some of the things they did, and something that happened there that didn't get as much press I thought as it should, but shows you about the press, was Obama actually, it's one thing to tap, and I'm not condoning it, to tap into Trump, because people can say, oh, well, he's, a menace to society.
Right.
But the Obama administration...
They might say that about you and me.
Yeah, no doubt. The Obama administration actually tapped the phones that reporters use at the Capitol to talk back, after viewing what you guys were doing on the House floor. Reporters pick up a phone
Right.
and call their various news agency, and the Obama administration tapped into that. And can you imagine if President Trump administration was accused or caught doing that, what it would be? They'd want to impeach him for that.
They'd be apoplectic. And they really would. And so this is why this article, I think, it's happening halfway across the world or 6 hours away from here, but that's something that can happen right here too. And this is where you have to be vigilant. And as you and I's goal is to educate, motivate, and activate people. This is why you have to show up at town hall meetings and things like that. And I know that's one of the topics you have towards the end of your topics that you wanted to talk about, are town hall meetings or the lack thereof.
Well, I'm going to read a bit from the
Sure.
article and we'll talk about it. This is from an Epic Times article. The Federal Intelligence Agency, talking about Germany now, agency said that the populist political party aims to exclude certain population groups from equal protection in our society.
Participation, yeah.
Yeah. What they're talking about is immigrants, really,
Right.
is kind of what it's code for. Having regarded the AfD, that's the party in Germany we're talking about, as a suspected extremist movement since 2021, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, BFV, on May 2nd designated the Populist Party as a right-wing extremist following an intensive and a comprehensive expert, whatever they are, examination. That's very convoluted, but it to a certain extent it sounds familiar, because basically that's what you were describing that the Obama administration and the Biden administration was doing to first the Tea Party under Obama, and now of course Trump. When they wouldn't even, the thing that always got me, Ted, is how you would hear them say, well, Mitch McConnell said that, Obama was going to be a one-term president. They were going to try to make him a one-term president. But they didn't even want to give President Trump a first term.
Right. No, they didn't. I mean, they were on him the day he came down the escalators at Trump Towers with Melania. They were after him that whole time. And this goes right into what you were saying here, how they wanted to prevent countering views from even participating, and they tried this with the Tea Party. As you and I were involved in that, and I was the second wave, got elected in the second wave of that. But those organizations are 501c3s, and they were trying to get tax-exempt status. Well, the IRS was blocking the conservative movements like that wanted to get tax-exempt status. Lois Lerner, and I know you've got a segment on her, how she blocked these, and it was proven that she blocked these, but yet the left wing, they got it approved just hands down. Just there was no holdup on those.
Well, I'm also took a little excerpt from a Breitbart article. Let me read a little bit from it. The Trump administration has accused Berlin of acting in a tyrannical manner after a top intelligence agency officially branded the populist AfD party as extremist group over its stance against mass migration,
right,
paving the way for more government spying against the right-wing party. And I love how they always label everything the right wing.
Right
It
wing.
sounds to me
Yeah.
like the right wing is if you care about the foundations of your society, your country, then you're obviously right wing.
That's right, and they're going after that because they want to get rid of the old and bring in this new, and that's fine on certain aspects. And society's going to change, but the things that you don't want to change are the very basic foundational principles, and that is our Constitution in this country. Those countries have the same thing, but they're wanting to change it and mold it. And keep in mind, this goes back to the one world government, the Klaus Schwab's, which is interesting because they got rid of Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum because apparently he was filling his own coffers with the coffers that he created, and he wasn't sharing the wealth.
Yeah, it's just something. But this is happening, and this is my label, happening all throughout what we would call the free world. That there are people are beginning to kind of return to their roots of their country. I think what's happening with this mass migration is that we famously used to call the United States the great melting pot.
Right.
But now people don't want to assimilate here. We want all these disparaging groups, and we're not doing the melting pot. And so that's happening all over Europe especially, but anywhere in the free world because, some of these communist countries don't allow a lot of this kind of stuff. And I'm not anti-immigrant. I mean, we are an immigrant nation to a certain extent, but we do need to be a melting pot because if you bring all these people in, even I'm not necessarily, Ted, saying that everybody who illegally comes to a country like ours is nefarious.
Right.
But if they don't have their roots in the culture of America, the freedom, the protections afforded our Constitution and all, then they're not going to understand when it's under attack. And I think we see this all over Europe right now.
And that's the thing we need to be vigilant about. And you brought up the word that I love is assimilation. We welcome people from all over the world to this country, but you have to assimilate. There's a reason people come here, and it's for liberty, freedom, opportunity. The opportunity to live in liberty and freedom, the opportunity to create the American dream, their dream. But you have to assimilate and protect that system that has created that. And this goes back to Theodore Roosevelt in 1906 or 7 when he said that. You know, he gave that famous speech on migration or immigration, and we welcome all people from all over. We are a melting pot. But understand, there's one flag. It's the American flag. You need to honor it. You need to assimilate. We cannot afford to be hyphenated. You know, you're either 100% American or not at all. That doesn't mean you forgo your heritage, but embrace that, but embrace the values that you came to this country for.
Well, we see that is very evident here in the great state of Florida, where
Sure
we're
do.
broadcasting from, because you look down in South Florida, and, you know, before immigration became as huge an issue, I mean, Florida literally had a huge influx a couple of times, but from Cuba.
Sure.
And Cuban Americans are some of the most patriotic, hardcore people that you'll find. And it's really what helped turn the state of Florida red was the Cuban population. And so migrants who come from some of these communist countries, if they assimilate, and I think if you go down in South Florida, you see it real evident that they have taken the best of their culture and incorporated it into American culture, and it's a unique blend down there. But you won't find more patriotic people than first, second, and third generation
Well, I was going to say
Cuban migrants.
the first and second generation, hardworking, strong patriots, and you know, they built the foundation for their families moving forward, and they haven't forgot that because they came from a country that was free. Yeah, there's probably as much corruption there as there is in ours today, but they got taken over by a communist dictator, Fidel Castro, and they remember how it was and where it went to, and it scared them. They came here to make sure that didn't happen here.
We see it literally now on a daily basis at the national level with, like, Marco Rubio.
Sure.
Is a great example of that as a Secretary of State for President Trump. I mean, he's passionate about freedom. He's passionate about the keeping not only America free, but the free world and anti-communist as they possibly could get.
Right.
But we're talking about, if you're just tuning in, what we're talking about is centered primarily over in Europe, but it's affecting us over here. And we were talking about the party in Germany that has been declared basically persona non grata, an extremist party. But this is happening, as I say, all over Europe. Here's an article from the New York Times. It says here, after 100 years, Britain's two-party political system may be crumbling. And they're talking about Nigel Farage, he's always been a very interesting person to me. And here's the term again, a right-wing populist party. Reform UK is presenting a serious challenge to the governing Labour Party and the opposition Conservatives, because they're kind of, you know, I guess in a way, it's like the MAGA movement, in that the old establishment Republican Party is not really have been in sync with them. And of course, the liberal progressive left is not either. And it's kind of almost the Republican Party now under Donald Trump is almost formed a third party in a sense.
It really has.
And so Nigel Farage has been winning some local elections, his party over there in England, and they're a bit upset about it.
They are. And if you go back to before Brexit, the UK was part of the EU. And then they realized it wasn't working so well, and they wanted their independence. And so they had the Brexit move to where they became separate from the European Union. They still participate with them. And this was going on in Holland. I forget this, it'll come to me. He was a guy that was real outspoken about the influx of Islamic immigrants and how it was changing the culture in Holland. And they arrested him and said he was all hate speech and all that. Now he's elected to the parliament because they saw what happened over the course of the years. And you and I were talking about this, about the extremists and what's happening in Europe. We see it happening in other countries. But this was written by Samuel Huntington in a book called Clash of the Civilizations back in the 90s, and it is verbatim what is going on in these countries. And it's time for people to wake up, and I think they are.
Yeah, and I love how the New York Times, this is a New York Times article about Nigel Farage. It says here, this is how they describe him. Nigel Farage, one of Britain's best known supporters of President Trump. Oh my God.
Oh, he knows
and the
he's bad.
leader of the anti-immigration reform UK party consolidated, check this out, his reputation as the country's foremost political disruptor. It remind you of anybody?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny how when you look at the squad members, they don't call them left-wing extremists or left-wing progressive extremists. They're just the squad, you know. And it's just a double standard that we see over and over again in our media here.
Well, that's probably why you famously had some issues with Miss Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
You know, I'm still waiting for the media to ask me why I even approached
because
her.
you were a disruptor, Ted. Did you know that? Did you know that Captain, we call him Captain Yoho, but he was Captain Disruptor as well.
I was told that.
Yeah, you were actually a political disruptor before Donald Trump was.
That's right.
In a way.
That's right.
But as I said earlier, what I see a lot here now is anybody who is about returning to the founding principles of their country, anybody who's about freedom and that type of thing is being labeled as right wing. Because you like,
shame on you.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of these people. I just think it's interesting how they're being under attack. And you mentioned this earlier in the show that the French, and here's their description again, French far right leader Marine Le Pen has been sentenced to a 5-year ban on running for public office. And this is happening all over what I call the free world, banning people from running for office, labeling them as extremists. If you question this kind of new world order, if you want to call it that, then you are a right-wing conspiracy. And my question is, could it happen here, Ted?
No,
or is it happening here?
Well, they tried to make it happen. You know, you go back prior to the 2024 election, and you think how many states tried to keep Trump off the ballots. I think there was 20-some states that tried to keep him off the ballot. I love that picture.
It's already happening here, Ted. There you see.
And it is. It's happening right here. And luckily our courts, you know, didn't allow it to happen. But that doesn't mean it's going to go away. They're going to come back harder and stronger next time. They're going to keep it off. You know, they'll attack Rubio if he runs for president as a guy that was anti-immigration and got all these people out and did all these illegal things, or J.D. Vance. And, you know, that's why we have to be vigilant. This is where it goes back to civics and teaching in school. The education that people should learn is the foundational principles of this country. It's a fascinating story, and you know, it needs to be taught. If not, it's going to be forgotten.
Well, you know, we just had the Kentucky Derby over the weekend, and I was sitting here thinking when you were talking about, you know, a safe bet, a good place to bet. And I'll tell you what, you want a sure bet, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if we allow the progressive Democrats to, and I don't know if there is any such thing other than that, if we allow them to take Congress back, let alone the Senate, it's a sure bet that they're going to impeach Donald Trump.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, they're already making plans of that. Senator Ossoff up in Georgia, who lost to Herschel Walker, he says there's grounds for impeachment. Jamie Raskins is already starting, you know, he started that talk as soon as Trump won, that they're going to impeach him. And their goal is to get the House and the Senate back. And if they get both of those, not only will he be impeached in the House, he'll get tried in the Senate and he'll be thrown out of office.
Well, what we're talking about is how political parties and political candidates are now being banned from running, being labeled extremists, and how it's really happening here. We're mainly talking about Europe and what I call the free world in general. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and we're going to delve more into whether or not and if it is happening here right now. But we'll be right back.
Sure.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Ward, that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth!
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's gonna come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. I wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
And we're back.
And
we're back on our pirate podcast. We always got that old warthog up there.
Love that warthog.
Our late friend Ward Scott, and you and I were talking on Friday's
Right.
show about we need the Ward to do his naked rain dance, and we did actually get some
Thank
rain
you,
in our
Ward.
area. Thanks, Ward. We appreciate it, brother. We appreciate it, because I don't know if you or I would be able to we'd bring the police if we were naked.
I think so.
Dancing
Yeah.
or whatever. But we've been talking about, we start out the show talking about what's happening over in Europe, specifically Germany, but then we went into England and France and all, about how these parties are being labeled as extremist, right-wing, and it ties into immigration and that kind of thing. People, if you're questioning the status quo over in Europe right now, you're being labeled as
How dare you?
right-wing
Yeah.
extremist. And we asked the question before we went to break, is it or could it happen here? And I think clearly, Ted, it has been. I'm going to bring up somebody here from the past, and people may or may not remember her. The name Nina Jankowicz. I think they're Janowitz or what a Janowitz.
That sounds good.
She, in case you jog your memory, and I'm going to play some video over in a minute, but she was the head of the Department of Homeland Security of Disinformation and Governance Board. It didn't last very long, but she was the chair of this under Biden. And basically what this was trying to do was control your opinions on social media and that type of thing. And here's just a little quick snippet of her right before she got this position. This is her singing about what she's going to be doing. Check this out.
It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared that intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh, information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origin seems slightly less atrocious. Whew.
You go supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
That was their audition tape, no doubt.
Yeah, and so this lady was the head. Let me read it again for you. That is a part of the Homeland Security Disinformation Governance Board, and their task was to basically look at social media and correct our opinions or whatever.
You know, the interesting thing, when I watched this and I read on her, about her, this is the Joseph Goebbels of the Nazi machine, the disinformation. And you go back to what they were doing with Facebook and these other social platforms, they were screening the information going out there. They were asking information to come off of that was negative against Biden. And they did this under Obama, too. Anything negative, they would go after and they would attack those people. And they're doing the same thing here. And they're the ones that have the disinformation going out there. And, of course, they set up an agency or a department to dispel disinformation, and it's coming from you and I, the right extremists, the people on the right they label us as extremists. And this is interesting because it's typical of what the progressives do. They come out and do something and they'll blame us for being anti-democratic or anti-constitution. And then they're the ones that are really doing that. So watch out, folks. Pay attention.
Absolutely. And this gal, she is still at it. If you think she's not, she's still at it. This is her over at testifying at the EU Parliament just last week, Miss Nina Janowitz. And listen, I'm only going to play a quick snippet of it, but she's talking to the EU Parliament, and I want you to hear what she has to say. And she's not singing, or she's singing a different tune. Check it out.
Before I describe the details of Russia's recent online influence campaigns, I would like to call upon you to stand firm against another autocracy, the United States of America. The Trump administration is undoubtedly preparing a pressure campaign to force EU institutions to roll back regulation like the
DSA. There, Ted, that she wants before she wants to talk about Russia and any of these other countries, she wants to warn them of the greatest threat that's possibly out there to freedom of speech and that type of thing is the United States.
Isn't that amazing? An American citizen goes to another country and throws us under the bus. People like that I don't know how they get a platform other than it is the liberal progressives and the communists putting her out there, letting her showcase this. And it's very un-American, and I would check her citizen status.
Yeah. And the question, how far will the left go? And I think you talked about this earlier in the show, but I want to play a brief snippet of it. You want to know how far they will go? We already seen them weaponizing government against President Trump, trying to keep him from even being able to run, let alone become president. And we know they've tried to remove him when he was in president. And we said it's a sure bet they'll try to impeach him, or they will impeach him, whether they'll be successful if they come back into power. But people may forget this. Back during the Obama administration, the Tea Party was kind of the MAGA movement, if you want to call it that, at that time. And the left literally was using every lever of government to destroy people in it. And this is Lois Lerner. She was essentially the head of the IRS under Barack Obama. And this is her testifying before a House committee about whether or not the IRS was used against groups like the Tea Party. Check it out.
The exempt organization's field office in Cincinnati, Ohio, used inappropriate criteria to identify for further review applications from organizations that plan to engage in political activity, which may mean that they did not qualify for tax exemption. On that same day, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the matters described in the Inspector General's report. In addition, members of this committee have accused me of providing false information when I responded to questions about the IRS processing of applications for tax exemption. I have not done anything wrong. I have not broken any laws. I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations, and I have not provided false information to this or any other congressional committee. And while I would very much like to answer the committee's questions today, I've been advised by my counsel to assert my constitutional right not to testify or answer questions related to the subject matter of this hearing. After very careful consideration, I have decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today. Because I'm asserting my right not to testify.
There she is, Ms. Lois Lerner, going before a House Congressional Committee investigating where the IRS was used to target American citizens to essentially squelch their political right. And she essentially said, oh, I did nothing wrong and everything, but on advice of counsel, I'm going to take the fifth. I mean, she works for the government.
Right.
And she's going to take a fifth to the Congress that is actually in charge of oversight of this. I mean, Ted, what are your thoughts on that?
I plead the fifth. No, I remember when this was going on because, you know, it was that Tea Party wave. And I think you and I talked about this. I think this is around 2011, 2012. This is exactly, you think of where we're at today and the attack on the conservative principles, people standing up to protect those. You look at the attack today, it's probably more egregious than it was back then. This was kind of the beginning of that. And here you have a lady, and we saw this firsthand. I had people calling me, you know, as I was going into Congress saying, we've applied a year and a half ago and we still haven't got our tax exempt status. And this happened over and over again. And so this machine has not gone away. It's gotten stronger. And all you have to do is look at the Biden administration and what they were doing to Trump, what they were doing to the parents that were sticking up in Virginia for their children, and you know the people outside of the abortion clinics. And this is an assault, and it's not going to go away. It's going to get stronger and more violent. And Antifa's out there, the protesters, the organized protesters that we talked about. I forget the names of those groups. It'll come back to me here, but I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, you know, we're talking a little bit there about the IRS, and people need to keep in mind that under the Biden administration, they were trying to hire almost 100,000, 75,000 new IRS workers and arm some of them. And that really wasn't to protect us from foreign adversaries. That was to investigate the American people. And if you think for a minute that that's just about aiming at the, quote, millionaires and billionaires, as Bernie would say, keep in mind that one of the proposals under the Biden administration was talking about if you did something like, Venmo or Zelle or something like that, that moving of money, if it was anything $600 and above, they wanted you to have to report that. $600, man.
Any transaction over $600. And again, this goes back to pay attention what's going on. What this other side, the left progressives, are trying to do, the Marxists is what I like to refer them, because their policies really are more Marxist than anything else, if not communist. And we talked about this last week. The person that is the head of the Democrat Socialists of America said all communists are socialists in the beginning. As they move towards socialism, once it becomes socialist, they move into communism. And we've seen this throughout history. We do not want that here.
Yeah, and as you saw, if anybody saw any of my little man on the street deal I did on last Thursday live, we got plenty of communists in our country right here in our community.
Right here in our own town.
Because if you haven't checked that out, look at wherever you're seeing this video. You can probably see it. But you know, Ted, and this is something that I wish I didn't have to say this, but I do. And that is that our republic, and that's what we have, is under grave threat. And it's not just Europe, it's happening right here. And this has always been one of my favorites that, Benjamin Franklin was asked, what did you give us at the Constitutional Convention? He said, a republic if you can keep it. And then, of course, the question then is, can we keep it? And, Ronald Reagan famously said that, that it can be lost in one generation. And that's why one of the reasons I think you and I are motivated to do this show is to keep it from happening during our generation.
It really is. And, to me, when Carolyn and I decided to run, it's all about the American dream. We came from nothing, and we had opportunity, and we had a work ethic, and we achieved that. And that's there for anybody. Doesn't matter your background, doesn't matter your race. It's the opportunity, and that's what's on the line here. And there's people that are out there trying to take it away. Once you get at the top of a Super Bowl or any sporting event or anything you've done and you've achieved success, you can't let off. I mean, it is something you have to fight to protect every day. And that's, again, I think is why we're here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we're here, as I say it all the time, but if I say it, it bears repeating. We're here to educate, motivate, and activate people. In other words, get busy. Because I'm telling you, we're going to show you some examples here in a few moments. The left is extremely vigilant, and they're extremely motivated and activated. And as I always say, Ted, and if we don't man the political ramparts, we're going to have to man the real ones again, and that price has been paid, and it would be a dadgum shame if we had to do that again.
Right.
And so I want to get into this next couple of stories here to kind of show you what's happening within the Democratic Party. The Dems, I say, are eating their own. I don't know if you saw this or not, and I saw a comment I'll say in a minute from Mr. Fetterman, but Newsweek article, John Fetterman, senator from Pennsylvania, ex-chief of staff sounds alarm that he is getting worse, that John Fetterman is getting worse. Current and former staffers to the Democratic Senator John Fetterman raised concerns about his health in an article published by New York magazine Intelligencer. Adam Jettleson, I think, his former chief of staff, said, talking about Fetterman, that he's on a bad trajectory. Now, I don't remember them saying that when he was running. He's probably on a bad trajectory because he's actually, I wouldn't say defended Donald Trump, but he's basically said that the Democratic Party needs to check itself a bit. And he also just today, he came out and made a statement on X, I think it was, that he supports Israel 100%, talking about this latest missile attack, and that we need to do anything in our power to help Israel defend itself from Iran and the Houthis and all that. I guess that's the bad path he's on.
That's the bad path he's on, and it's interesting how this former chief of staff is coming out bashing him, trying to discredit John Fetterman. John Fetterman, I remember, I wasn't a fan of his. I'm thinking, how in the heck did this guy get elected? But he's there. And the thing I like about him is he says, I'm not owned by the Democratic Party. I have my own beliefs, and I'm going to stand up for those. And when he started to go against the talk or the stance of the progressives, they started to come after him. When he went down to Mar-a-Lago, it was like, oh my God, how can he do that? He's giving alms to President Trump. And it was then they started to come out against him. It's like this former chief of staff writing these hit pieces on him. But where were those people when Biden was incoherent? His cognition was definitely, everybody knew it was down. But they didn't say a word because he was carrying the water bucket for the Democrat progressives.
Yeah, when Biden was running circles around people, right?
Yeah, right.
But you talk about Fetterman. Here he is on a recent episode of Bill Maher's show. We're just going to play a few seconds of it, and I think you'll see why they say Fetterman is on the wrong path, on a bad path now, bad trajectory.
I said, well, I think there's a big difference between woke, but words migrate, and it went to something else. I think there's a big difference between an old school liberal and a woke person. You say progressive Democrat. How do you describe this?
I didn't leave the label. It left me. After it happened on October 7th, I really knew that that whole progressive stack would be blasted apart.
How do you explain that, if you can, that the people who consider themselves the most liberal have abandoned Israel for the people outwardly say they want a genocide? Why do you think that is? And will this split the Democratic Party?
It does, because some of the most progressive parts of the Democratic Party are standing for the kind of side that have kinds of organizations like Hamas or these kind of nations that there are no rights for women. And even in Philadelphia, the Queers for Palestine blocked the
what
pride.
a bad path he's on right there when he talks about the progressive left him, and he's actually defending Israel and women and that type of thing because of the attacks of Hamas. I mean, that he's opposed to terrorism, and I guess that puts him on a bad path.
Shame on him. He strayed from their talking points, and they have no tolerance for that.
Hey, good night, everyone.
They're going to discredit him, and they'll run somebody against him, whether it'll be David Hogue puts money into that race, which is the Senate race side, out he will. But they will do what they can to discredit him. They did the same thing with Schumer. They did the same thing with Dick Durbin. They're doing it to Pelosi now. And they want to get rid of the old guard, bring in the new the left radical extremists. How's that?
Yeah,
I can use that, right?
You mentioned Schumer, and I have to bring this up. I didn't play the video of it, but if you hadn't seen it, check it out. So earlier this week, Schumer's holding his press conference thing, and he's bashing. You know how he looks down like this, and he's telling Donald Trump has got the lowest poll ratings in the first 100 days of anybody, and it's just unbelievable. And the first question from a reporter, I got to have credit. He says, "Mr. Schumer, but your poll numbers are like half of it. You're twice as bad." And Schumer's like,
that threw him off.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to ask those questions.
You're not supposed to ask that. But here, Ted, my issue with how they're treating Fetterman, and normally I wouldn't play something like this because I don't like to take advantage of some people's mental health issues. But this is Fetterman at the debate with Dr. Oz, just a minute or so of it, when he was running for Senate and was recovering from a stroke.
And I think this is where I started paying attention to him. And I'm like, how did this guy even get on stage? Yeah. And this is shortly after he had a stroke and he was recovering, and he hadn't been doing any of these meetings. So this is one of the first ones, I think.
Yeah, let's play this, and we'll come back and talk about it.
No, here's what I think we have to fight about inflation here right now. That's what we need to fight about, inflation. And I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served. That's it. He got his Pennsylvania house from his own inlays from $1.
Mr.
Oh, I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand and I do support fracking.
Okay.
Now, we all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full-time, you should be able to live in dignity as well. True. That's what I believe. I don't ever recall in the Statue of Liberty did they say, take our tired, huddled masses and put them on a bus. There, everybody in Braddock, an overwhelmingly majority community of black community.
All is that they say that Mr. Fetterman, Senator Fetterman, is on a bad path now that he is actually pretty coherent and standing up against some of the progressive ideals. But when he literally is so bad off mentally from his stroke that he starts out the debate by saying good night to everybody.
Short debate.
But they had no issue with that whatsoever.
None whatsoever. You talk about a double standard. It's hypocritical. And as long as he's a solid Democrat, liberal, progressive vote, they'll do whatever they can to get him in office. And this is the same thing. They try to retain Joe Biden for the same reason. But when he has his own thoughts and his own mind and he comes out and says, no, I'm not going to support that, and he goes against their talking points, man, he's unstable now.
And the question you might have is how far what I call in these radicals go. Well, I want to, and I'm not trying to defend this person at all, but I want to play a brief snippet of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because you have to kind of say her name like that, when she was at an event just this past week. Now, she's supposed to be the darling of the left. Watch what happens to Miss Cortez at her speaking event. Check this out.
Protect against everything that's going on? How do we make sure that what can we do to prevent this erosion, all this stuff that's happening? We do it by exercising and using our constitutional rights. Our rights are use it or lose it. So we need to use it.
There you have the darling of the progressive left, the leader of the squad, maybe the next presidential nominee of the Democratic Party.
Let's hope.
Ocasio-Cortez, and she's being shouted out by people, I guess these pro-Hamas people, calling her a liar and basically insinuating that she is a supporter of Israel and not Hamas. I mean, she's under attack from some of the same groups that Donald Trump is. And the reason I bring this up to people,
maybe they can do a rally together.
You know, one of the things you've heard me say, Ted, that I went to this communist rally the other day and all these people were talking about things. And you know, I mentioned that I think on Friday's show that people should watch like the movie Dr. Zhivago, because a lot of these people who are like spouting communism, if communism actually came to America, they'd be the first one shot, like
they really would
Trotsky.
Be.
So these
don't
radicals,
understand that.
if we allow them to take the country, no one's going to be safe, including Miss Cortez.
That's right. Because she'll be part of the elite crowd. She'll be up there with Pelosi and all these other ones, and you know, that's what happens. They cannibalize themselves, and I mean, this is a good example of this. And this is just the beginning of this. I mean, as you said, AOC's the darling of that progressive wing, but how dare she stand up for the Israel versus the Palestinians? And people need to remember how this attack happened. What happened there? Who was the attacker? Kind of like Russia, you know, with going into Ukraine. The bad people are real evident, but somehow they're defending them on the liberal progressive side.
Yeah, it got me to thinking about, okay, if Fetterman is off on the wrong track and now Ocasio-Cortez can be shouted down, what if they could wave a magic wand, who would they run? Louis Farrakhan? I mean, who would be their candidate? I don't know who the heck their candidate would be. But you brought this up, Ted, and I wanted to talk about it because it's kind of along the same lines that this is from an ABC News South Carolina. Coalition of mothers, grandmothers demand, whatever that means, respectful public town hall from Senator Graham. And there's a new group demanding a public town hall from one of South Carolina's elected officials, and it's Lindsey Graham. And this is happening all over the place. There's versions of it happening here that I'll play you in a minute. But what were your concerns about this, Ted?
Well, you know, they're demanding, you know, he show up for the town hall. And I did enough of these towards the end of my career where we would show up at these town halls and there would be a group of 20 or 30 people that when we do 3 or 4 in a day, and they would be at each one of the same group, and they're there to yell, they're there to shout down anytime you go to speak, and they just want to shut it down. And they're doing the same thing here, and it's a very organized. We see it. There was a group. It's nationally. It's called Resist, and there's another very progressive group out there. And it wouldn't surprise me if these grandmothers and mothers are there wanting Senator Graham to come out and explain his votes, and it's going to be about cuts to Medicare, cuts to Medicaid, and this is going to get more and more as we go into the midterms.
Well, what they're trying to do, and Mr. What's the gentleman's
Senator
name?
Graham?
No, the House member from Kentucky that's on the chair of one of these committees. I'm trying to
Thomas Massey?
No, the other gentleman. He's very outspoken. Anyway, I can't think.
Virgil. Tim Birchfield.
He starts with a G, I think. But anyway, he said at one of his hearings about a month ago that all that these he was talking about members of the House were just looking for some type of snippet to be on MSNBC.
Right.
And I agree with it. That's all they're looking for. They're not trying to, like Lindsey Graham, they don't want a solution from him. They don't want to even debate him. They want to catch him up on a sound bite that they can play and say, oh, he's for cutting Medicare. I mean, like, look what they're doing to President Trump. President Trump again came out on an NBC interview over the weekend, I think yesterday, and said he's not going to cut Social Security. He's not going to cut Medicaid or Medicare. He's not going to do it, yet they're constantly trying to put that he is. And he did say something that has gotten big time news when he's asked about all this due process stuff and these immigrants. He said, they asked, well, don't you have to follow the Constitution? And he said the words, I don't know. And they just, but that's not really what he meant. He said, I don't know. It's just something that's going to have to be debated by the lawyers and stuff and in court. He never said he wasn't going to follow court orders. In fact, he said just the opposite again. But the snippet they play is him saying, I don't know if I have to follow the Constitution. And that is really not what he said.
It's really not. And I've been a victim of I don't want to say victim because I sound like a Democrat. I've had this happen to me where you say something and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is what he said. No, that's not what I said. I was saying that to bring this point up, but they'll focus on that, and they're doing the same thing here with President Trump. But it's just something that will not go away. They're going to do more and more of this. The resist groups out there, they're going to get stronger and stronger, and they're going to be yelling at these town hall meetings. And that's why a lot of the representatives have canceled their town halls, because they're not productive. They're there for kind of what you were saying. They want to get the air bite. They want to get the sound bites and have their 15 seconds of fame.
Well, I want to play you a brief snippet of an event that I think this has been duplicated all over the country. They call it the empty chair debate or whatever, town hall meeting. And this is our local representative here for the district you used to be in, Ted, Kat Kamek. This liberal group puts on these things where they call it the empty chair. And I'm just going to play you one brief snippet of it, but I think you'll get the idea of it. And check this out.
My question is, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution. For 3 months, I've been calling your office to ask you to stop rolling over and abdicating your congressional role to an unelected authority, again, DOJ. Now the White House is ignoring a
Your staff assured me that you would meet with us soon. The scheduler would call.
Hi, my name is Judy Etzler, and I'm embarrassed by your representation. You're not doing your job. You are part of our government. You are part of the government that...
So I don't know how well you could see all that, but basically this was at a local church here, and the gentleman that's moderating that, he basically admits that he's part of a Communist Party deal, but they got these people coming up and asking questions of an empty chair. They know that in this case, Representative Kamek is not going to come there. And I know Kat, Representative Kamek,
sure.
She doesn't shy away from these kind of things, just as you wouldn't have either. If people are wanting an honest debate and wanting to talk about solutions to problems, but all they're trying to do is put a person on the spot and get them to say something they can use as a campaign clip. That's all that's about.
Is. The person that did the best empty chair was Clint Eastwood in the presidential convention up in, I think it was in Cleveland. And we all remember that. That was worthy of an Emmy or an Oscar. And then these other groups are following and trying to duplicate that. But it is a point where they want to go up there, they want to try to humiliate the person, and they're not productive to show up. And the other thing that happens, and we saw this in some of the more current town hall meetings when they're live, there's a security risk there. And we had threats, and so we had SWAT teams there, and the cost that goes on that, and of course our sheriff at the time wanted to charge our team the security charges for that. And it gets out of hand. And so we went to the virtual town hall meetings, and I felt they were more productive. We could take questions, we could have live answers and things like that. But this is a breakdown in society and respect, and just get your point out there. No telling where this will lead to.
Yeah, well, when you talk about security threat, all you got to do is look at the statistic. A poll came out not too long ago that 28% of Democrats thought it would be okay for President Trump to be assassinated. And then we just saw that they're turning a folk hero. There's actually going to be a musical about the guy that shot the United Healthcare CEO in cold blood on the streets of New York.
Yeah, with his sidekicks P. Diddy and Sam Brinkman-Fried.
It's just insane. And
of course, it's going to air in San Francisco to start. I hope it never shows. I hope they shut it down from lack of support.
And I'll close with two things here. One is we keep hearing, and this concerns me a great deal, that the Democratic Party is through. They can't make a comeback. I tell you, don't bet on that whatsoever, because they're highly organized. They will do anything to win. And if you do not take them for granted, let's put it that way.
Right. Evil never goes away, and they'll rebrand themselves and come back, and you'll think they're your best friends, but don't fall for it.
Well, I want to tell people as we close that Ted and I are going to be on a show tonight called Survival Dispatch, and it's going to be on tonight from 6:45 to 8 Eastern Standard Time, and you can see it across YouTube. Survival Dispatch. There's a little moniker of it. It's also on Substack, and we're going to be interviewed by Christopher Haven. And we're going to talk about a lot of the same type of stuff we're talking about here. So tune in tonight, Survival Dispatch, or watch it wherever you watch your favorite podcast.
And he's got a large following, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I'm going to be boarding a plane right around there, so I don't know how much time I'll be able to be on there, but I'll be on there as much as I can.
And we're going to keep fighting the good fight. That's
we
why
sure will.
Ted is flying around, taking the message everywhere. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. We certainly do. We're on every Monday and Friday live from 9 to 10. And Ted, you want to take us out?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate our sponsors. Spread the word. Send us your comments. Send us your questions, your topics that you want to discuss. We'll be happy to go over those. And other than that, have a great day.
Peace out.
Take care.